When rappers that sing. So I was actually requested to do a video on a specific topic, and that is the transition from rapping to singing that some people make sometimes when they decide they want to try to sing on their own songs or whatever, and kind of the difficulties that comes with and the advantages that rappers sort of have in doing that. I was asked to do this because of a specific artist that I work with. His name's Folk. You can find him on all social media. He started as a rapper many years before I met him, and then a couple years after I met him, and then just one day he wanted to branch out. The difference between his rap and his singing is so big that it's one of those things where people hear it and they're just like, oh, that's you? And so people were asking him, like, what did you do? Or how did you do it? Or like, how does that work? So he asked me to talk about it, and I'm happy to, because it's a fascinating subject. This video could be way longer than I have time for today. I have notes. So I guess the easiest place to start is got to be the advantages that rappers kind of inherently have moving into singing. Well, the obvious one is rappers have rhythm, right? You don't have to teach that aspect of it. They can understand, they can plot out where things fit, how they want to fit them, and just extending vowels does not really change that at all. So you don't have to worry about timing and stuff with a rapper, which you do with some completely novice singers and things like that, right? You have to teach them to plan their timing. Some people don't plan their timing. They just kind of like stuff falls out of their mouth a little bit different every time. And look, sometimes you can make that work. It's like everything, right? Sometimes that works, but mostly that doesn't work. And it certainly doesn't work all the time, and you can't rely on it. But anyway, rappers do not have that problem. Rappers also have a hidden advantage that most people don't think of, in that they're used to manipulating the language for sound reasons. Like in rap, it kind of surfaces as a lot of like slang and slant rhymes and just kind of saying words in ways that are interesting, just sound better. And that is a huge skill that people need to learn when they get into singing, is that you don't really sing the words correctly. You sing them how they sound good. It's not like a blanket thing, but that does translate from rapping to singing, where at least the idea exists in their head that language is to be manipulated for sound, right? Now, often there's a bit of code switching that happens when a rapper starts to sing, so they don't allow themselves the same rules when they sing as when they rap, but they should, right? Because it's the same. I'm not saying you will choose the same slang and things like that, but the concept is the same, right? You're going to manipulate the language to make it sound better. That's where they have their advantages. They have rhythm, and they understand manipulating language for sound. What rappers don't usually come with is, well, may or may not pitch, right? Some rappers come with like a base level of inherent understanding of pitch. Like Folk, I don't know where he sang before. It could have been church. I feel like that might be true, but whatever. It's usually church. When somebody has kind of a base layer of the ability to sing that's half decent and you can't figure out where they built that base layer of ability, frequently it's church. Like, you can usually make that guess. It's not always true, but it's frequently true. So he came in with kind of good tone and the ability to hear pitch, and some foundational stuff was already done. And that's great. That takes a lot of time off the getting to be good thing. A lot of rappers don't. They don't come in with that foundational knowledge, right? They come in with a loose idea about singing that's not actually consciously analyzed, which is how people approach art a lot of times. And if you want to be good, you really need to get into that real analysis thing. So they might not hear pitch very well, which is a thing that can usually be taught. Some people are pitch deaf, it's true, but it's pretty rare, actually. You got to start there, work your way up with... There's so much to singing. It's ridiculous. I'm going to have to be so surface level just to get this video under an hour. But not everybody obviously has any foundational singing. They just have rapping. And so you have to start all the way from the bottom. You can usually teach somebody to sing. It's just, it takes a long time because there's so much to it. There are so much you need to think about. And sure, there are people that kind of inherently sing well, and by well, I mean like they use their instrument correctly, but it almost always has to be taught to some lesser or greater amount, and usually greater, right? Because people aren't thinking about the things that they need to think about to be a really good singer. People fail to understand how much intentionality is required for a really good singer. So the next thing you kind of got to do is you kind of got to find the bad habits and begin to try to break those bad habits down, which is difficult because your ability to help somebody sing and their ability to listen is based entirely on your relationship, or at least maybe they've heard enough about you where they trust you when you speak, but not everybody can. When Pofolk first started singing, I would try to guide him. You're always got to be kind of soft at first because you don't know how people are going to react to criticism and just kind of being told what to do. So you try to be nice into it. But he knows he can sing a little bit, but he's just seen me behind a board and we've worked on rap. So when I tell him to do things, he's not sure at first. He's like, does this guy actually know what he's talking about? Because if you hear me sing, I'm not a great singer. I'm not. I'm just not. But I know how you should be doing it, which is a funny thing. Like I spend so much of this job that I have, so much of this job is vocal coaching. It's huge. It is massive, or it should be, because if you're not doing it, you're probably putting your clients at a disadvantage, right? Now you got to figure out how to approach that, and that's all super difficult. That interpersonal thing, building trust, and I couldn't even do a whole video on that. That could be a series just on that alone. People come in, it depends on their ego too, but people come in with a certain amount of like security or insecurity in themselves and their talent, and they just don't want everybody telling them how to do their thing. Because first off, like, and this is reasonable to assume, like people get real worried that even if you're right, like you're going to be squishing their thing and trying to turn it into something else. And that's a whole other thing, right? You have to just be able to look at people and be like, okay, what are they doing that maybe shouldn't be changed because that feels like it's an element of them. And even if it might be technically incorrect in some way, right? What does that even mean? If we get rid of it, are we subtracting? That is a valid concern people have. Like, why are you telling me how to sing? I know how to sing like me, right? So you have to find the things that need improvement, the things that want improvement, that make things better, but allow that person to continue to sound like themselves, or their singing self, at least, right? So building the trust that you can make those calls will be correct, and you can be trusted to value a person's individuality, even where it sort of rubs against the grain of technical correctness. That takes a long time to build that sort of trust in a person. Some people are actually amazing, right? You can just ask them to do things and they're willing to try anything. And that's all you can ask out of a person. Just try it. Let's hear it back. That's all you can ever ask out of a person. They can always say, no, that's fine. It's fine. But, give it a shot. This is a little out of order. But one of the problems I see when people are inexperienced singers, especially, and the rappers that are moving to singing, and they're trying autotune. I don't get why people act like autotune is the devil, like whatever. If it sounds good, it sounds good, right? Who cares, like, what the tool is? Like, I did that video on how we record things that are impossible all the time. What do you think is real and what is unreal? All of multi-track recording is unreal. You're playing instruments separately and then correcting little tiny bits of those performances so that you have an ideal version of the piece of art you're trying to make. Like, that's not natural. Like, what do you mean? Like, you can do that, but you can't have auto-tune. Like, people put that line in the most arbitrary and self-serving place. Don't do that. It's just another thing. It's good or it isn't. It has nothing to do with the technology. Nothing's cheating because everything is cheating. If you're recording on analog tape, they would be cutting the tape and using different pieces of the performance to put them together. We have always in the studio replaced band musicians with session players to get better performances. They just don't talk about it. It's all cheating. Like, who gives a crap? right? Whatever. People do this thing especially when they're new to singing and they're using autotune, especially a hard tune, they will do this end sound like, ah, yeah, yeah. I'm doing it bad. Like I would almost have to like hear it to do a good job of it. But they try to make the sound of autotune when they're singing, right? And you don't have to do that because autotune's going to do that, but it's just a thing. I've seen many people do it. And it's just sort of naturalistic where people kind of lean into the sound of the autotune with their own voice, and you shouldn't be doing that. Just sing how you want it to sound and let the autotune do the autotune thing, and it'll add not just the tunage, but that thing that has that like robotic end sound a little bit. It's not really an end sound, but I feel like that's how it manifests when people are faking it by adding a little bit of nasalness to their vocal, which is a whole other thing. Oh my God, vocals are so big. So big. There's too much to talk about. One thing that's often a problem, almost always, is people come in and when they're trying to do runs and they're not trained or they don't have much experience, they kind of do this thing where they're not picking their notes. They're just kind of using their vibrato, which I don't have, to throw them around a little bit in the hopes that they will hit notes that are actually in scale. And especially if somebody's new and their pitch isn't perfect, those notes can pass so fast that they will not hear them as wrong because they simply don't have the experience or they don't have the listening skill. This is a problem because then you're like, this note is wrong and they can't hear it. They're like, that's fine. And you're like, just because it slips past you doesn't mean that it doesn't affect the listener emotionally, which it does. Now, what is and isn't a wrong note is an entire philosophical discussion that we're not here to have, right? For now, it's a wrong note. It's just not in scale. And so you have to teach them, or they'll learn over time to hear those notes. And until then, you just kind of have to usually just kind of take a little bit of control and maybe melodine those notes a little bit or just encourage them to do runs until they get one right. But what you really need to teach them is intentionality. Intentionality is huge. Those crazy fast runs you hear like R&B singers and stuff do, they know exactly every note they're going to hit on that run. They're not just like coughing that out. Even if they're writing it in the moment, they know where the scale is, like somebody improvising on a lead guitar. They kind of know where the scale is and they know if they hit a wrong note, no matter how fast it is. So you really need to approach that stuff with just intentionality. Like make your runs, especially when you're new, write your runs. You don't have to write them on paper, just in your head. Plan it out ahead of time so that you can actually hit it. Because if you're just like spitting stuff out and you're not just an amazing singer, you're going to miss those notes. A part of the problem is people don't understand how good singers are. Throwing yourself in and trying to do these mad runs, it's like you play neighborhood basketball and you're just like, oh, put me in, coach. I'll 1v1 Kobe or whatever. There's a gulf between those two skill levels, no matter how good that first person is, that is difficult to understand. People just hear those runs and they just think they're thrown out. They're not. Those people are really good. You're probably not ready to play that game yet. Plan your runs out and stuff, especially when you're new. Intentionality is huge, right? Sometimes you can spit some stuff out and everything will land just fine. That's fine. But the likelihood of you doing that when you're not very experienced is pretty low. That's a problem that a lot of new singers have, especially when they're like really into R&B. They think that those runs are just some stuff that like fell out of somebody's mouth. You're like, yeah, after singing for 10 years and being trained by somebody else who already knew. Wow. One of the big things that you're doing all the time, even with great singers, and this is a thing that can be hard to learn, is choosing what vowels to sing, because the English language is kind of a minefield of vowels or vowel consonant combinations that are just not very pleasing to the ear if you just sing them exactly how they're properly said, whatever that means. So you're always like doing this thing where you're like I's and E's become O's and A's a little bit. Like you're not saying sign, you're saying sign. See, you put that into an O. And that happens in everything you hear. All music you hear, English music, is sung that way. We're always smashing vowels and like morphing them into other vowels that are more pleasant. And certain words, even like consonants and stuff, but it's mostly vowels. And you just don't notice it because it doesn't matter. But if you pay attention, you'll hear it in everything. So sometimes like convincing people to use the wrong vowel can be hard too. And you're just like, remember, this is music. It has to sound good. So the sound of the words you use is almost as important as the words themselves is. It's ridiculous how much that matters. Again, in the case of Po Folk, he just kind of inherently had a good way that he approached vowels naturally. I don't know where that comes from, right? It just happened to work that mostly he gets that right. Every once in a while, we'll like work on something a little bit, but that's such a common adjustment to have to make for most people, and he kind of had that advantage. The one he missed was like he was always trying to do those crazy runs before he could do them, and eventually he learned and got better because he's been singing now for a while. Got better at doing runs, like picking his path and being intentional. So he had the one advantage, but not the other. Also, he doesn't sing out of his nose, which is what a lot of people do. So you sing, well, it sounds good. I guess the last thing I'll pop onto here is writing pop as opposed to rap. They're completely different, wildly different. Well, not always, but kinda. Rap is very close to traditional poetry, right? It's traditional poetry with a lot of slang, but it's built like and can perform read, right? You can read a lot of rap songs and it'll feel like poetry. That's not true with pop. Pop vocals and writing need to exist in a song. Most of the times, a lot of pop stuff, if you take it out of the song, it's kind of nonsense or it feels weird and bumpy. It needs the context of the song frequently to make sense. And that's fine. That's not a judgment of pop writing. That is to say that art form is a combination of music and words that need to stay together like a motor needs to stay in a car. Nobody pulls a motor out of a car, sits on it, and then wonders why it won't go forward. The whole thing is what makes it work. Immaterial if individual pieces do the thing you want done. It's the whole thing that matters. Pop is way more like that. Like the words are super important, but they're usually a lot more kind of esoteric. Although, there's some very good storytelling in pop, of course. But frequently it's a lot looser. It's a lot more about like painting an emotional picture or vibes than it is about getting a literal thing across in the music. So that it's just a different sort of vocal writing by far. It's very hard. It's also super small, right? If you rap, you're going from like sometimes a page for a verse. And then you get into pop and it's 4 lines for an entire verse frequently. 8 lines, maybe. And you got to get something across that connects with people, makes sense, or at least they can make sense of it, even if it doesn't make sense in and of itself. And with the context of the music, obviously giving them, some emotional weight. And you got to do that in almost no lines. It's got to hold the whole song up. And then you go to a chorus that's pretty similar. You don't have much room in a pop song, or typically, right? Anything can be anything. We're not talking about rules. There are no real rules in music. There are very good guidelines that you can break sometimes and it works great. But usually there's a lot of guidelines where you don't really get to break them that much. But pop writing is like that. You have so many less words to do approximately the same amount of emotional labor. Kind of, especially because pop is such a rigid form, or it can be such an incredibly rigid verse, chorus form. Of course, a lot of rap is just as rigid. It's ridiculously hard to make a good pop song. One that is enduring and will really get people's attention. Again, Larry actually pretty good about that. He understood, he got into it, and he's like, probably just from listening, he figured it out. The problem is a lot of people, they listen, but they don't hear. They kind of listen, they enjoy the music, but they never do the analysis of what's kind of going on in the background, which you don't ever know what makes a thing good, kind of, because I don't even know what that means. But they don't do the analysis that says, oh, look, this is short, right? Simple things like that. Look how short this is. That's not a conscious thought sometimes people have had, because they're not just looking at it that way. They're enjoying the music. And that's fine. But you should surface those thoughts when you're trying to learn a thing, right? You should be like, oh, this is 4 lines. What are we doing here? We're repeating. It doesn't sound like anything, but people don't surface those thoughts, right? It's just like they hear the music, they enjoy the music, it's fine. They don't do analysis. And so I think that's what keeps people that have as much exposure to pop music as everyone else from being able to even hit the forms, let alone write a good song. Because again, that writing a good pop song thing is just killer. But Po Folk, he kind of, again, had a nice intuitive grasp. The song Still, one of my favorite pop songs I've ever recorded here. That is a fantastic pop song to me. A sort of thing you may or may not like, but I think it's done well, right? Opinions are whatever. And I guess the last thing is patience. Patience for yourself and patience for your engineer or your client if it's the other side of the relationship. It takes a long time to get good at something. Singing is not easy. Again, rappers come with a couple advantages, but singing is like rapping, but with more stuff. Now you got to hold pitches and think about vowels and things like that in a different way. And when to use vibrato, when not to. Can you control your vibrato? Do you need to learn to scream? God, there's so much. It's just huge. It's huge, and none of it's particularly easy. So have patience with yourself and anybody that's trying or trying to help you. Just do your best, because, you're not going to go from even where somebody like Po Folk started, which was decent, to good. You're not going to do that in one song, and you can't force yourself to do that in one song. You just gotta take that trip, baby. All right. Good luck.